podcast. So this week on the podcast, I'm so honored to be talking to Isabel. Isabel's a really good friend of mine, but she has this Instagram account called intuitivelyisabel. And what I love so much about her account is I've seen so many different like food accounts, but hers is so like genuine and it's really sharing like the love of food, the love of life. And I honestly Isabel, I've been scrolling through my phone before and I've seen your reels and I was like like moved to the next reel and I feel so happy from seeing it. Like they're so positive and so uplifting. So I want to say a massive thank you for coming on. And I wanted to ask you the question of the podcast, which is, hey, you okay? So how are you doing? How are you today?
Thank you for such a nice little introduction.
That's all right.
I am. Well, I've just been telling you, I'm very tired today, to be honest. I'm so exhausted. I was doing my uni assignment until 2 a.m. last night. So don't do that. Don't be like me. I'm literally like, you know, when you like are absolutely burning the candle at both ends? Like, we've just had a reading week and I just filled it with so much stuff. So I'm just so tired.
No, I'm
But I'm
completely the same.
excited and nervous for the podcast.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
I told you before, you're so natural at doing this. So no stress at all. Like, you're so good at this already.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
That's all right. So I want to take you back to the very, very beginning. I feel it's the only best place to start. And I wanted to ask you, because like I know when I created this podcast, like I had a really spontaneous idea to do it and I kind of just lunged myself into it. What did that look like for you? Like, how did you first decide to create your own Instagram account? What inspired that and why did you decide to do it?
So I'll give you the whole backstory. So I got really into food from my dad, who's an amazing chef. Well, he's not a chef, but he like is like a great home cook. Like, definitely could have been a chef. And I think if kind of like the timings of the job weren't so rubbish, he probably would have been a chef because he is great. And then I had a mum who was a ballerina who was always quite health conscious. And so I always had like food and nutrition as quite a big part of my life. And I'm grateful for like how my family brought me up with food. And then as I was a teenager, I started to get sick a lot. So I at school was just ill all the time and got really into nutrition because even though I didn't really know what was wrong with me and I didn't know about nutrition that much, it was kind of like food was like a way that mentally I felt like I could control something and like help myself in some way, when maybe doctors necessarily weren't. Like I kind of went through the medical system with years of people telling me I was fine, nothing was wrong with me, felt like a hypochondriac for a long time. And I think I got into nutrition through that. And then as I got older, I did find out like I had kind of an immune disorder and connective tissue disorder. And so then I started my Instagram mainly because I was sharing my life living with like chronic illnesses, chronic disorders. And from there I included a lot of recipes because for me that was kind of like a large part of my like my illness life, like the disease life, because I was really into like health and nutrition and helping myself in that way. So I would share recipes, but also a lot of my older content is to do with like connective tissue disorders and immune disorders. And yeah, so one day I just decided to start an Instagram to post the recipes because I felt like I had a little bit of an idea of like food and nutrition, especially because I was quite young when I got into it.
So yeah, how long have you been doing it for now? Like I've known you for probably about like a bit under a year. Like so I've been following your account since I've known you. But how long? When did you first start doing it? Like how long have you had the account for?
Well, it's actually so funny because this is my second food account that I've had.
Okay,
So
all right.
my first
You gotta
one,
explain that. Why did you start a new one? I feel like there's a story here.
my first one's called Belly's Breakfast Bowls, which is a name that my dad came up with because I used to be really into like making acai bowls, which I mean I still do. Like I worked in an acai bowl shop. Like it was something that I was doing at like 14, 15, was making smoothie bowls and acai bowls, and I had a page where I'd literally post smoothie bowls, and like it was just my breakfast bowls. And then I don't know what happened to that. Maybe I got logged out. Maybe I just stopped. But it's actually still out there. So don't search for it.
Yeah,
because
anyone listening, go check out on Instagram.
And then that was when I was maybe 15. I started that. And then I think it doesn't have that much on it, but I feel like I had it kind of for about 2 years. And then when I think it was in lockdown that I started Intuitively Isabel. And I can't remember what it used to be called. It used to have a different name. But I started that in lockdown, was doing that for still doing that. And then changed the name maybe 3 years ago to Intuitively Isabel, and it's
It's
been
such a catchy
Intuitively Isabel
name. I've
since.
always like remembered it kind of thing. It's really I don't know. It's got a ring to it. It's good.
Thank you. It's the alliteration.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to ask
Hmm.
you, like, obviously there is a lot of like different food Instagram accounts. There's loads of things I've seen, and like I know from my standpoint why your Instagram really stands out, and I've mentioned at the start of this. But for you, when you first created it, what did you want to do differently to other Instagram accounts and specifically other food accounts?
Um, well, I think when I created it, I probably had less of a clue than I do now because I was kind of just posting to find myself in that community of like other people
Mm,
struggling with chronic illness because it's not something that you see like, especially when I was younger, it wasn't that something that I saw that commonly with my friends and like people at school, as you know, not many people are suffering from the same things you are. So I started it kind of to find a community, and actually a lot of my followers still are people with like the same medical conditions that I have. So
mm,
that's really nice. But kind of as I have had my account for a few years and social media obviously blew up, I think probably when we were like in our teenage years, social media
mm,
got so big. And sometimes I wish I didn't have so much social media as a teenager because the influence of like what's good and bad and what we should like and what we shouldn't like is so huge on social media. And so
mm,
that's one thing now I try not to do on my Instagram is like, oh, don't eat this, this is bad, eat this is good, because there's
mm,
so much on the internet of like, one thing is like lemon water, like all the wellness influencers telling you like drink lemon water to detoxify yourself. But like lemon water is just as good as normal water with maybe a bit more vitamin C. Like the lemon isn't going to magically detoxify you. So there's like all these myths of like what's good
mm.
and what's bad on social media. And there are videos, I don't know if you've seen them, but where it's like, oh, don't eat meat because meat's bad for you. Eat like beans and stuff. And then they're like, but don't eat beans because beans are bad for you. And our ancestors
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
eat
yeah.
them. And it's like, you can find a flaw in everything based on what people are saying online. So I try to keep it light. If anything,
Definitely.
I'll say like, oh, this is good, but I won't ever be like, don't have this because I feel like that can be more damaging. And yeah, especially because everyone's unique and we all have our own unique needs.
Yeah, I
What's
love
good for
that.
one person might be different for another.
That's such a good comment, and I think, like you said, we're all very different, and I think that's
Mm.
I want to build on to kind of wellness. And I know, for example, my journey with wellness will be different to someone else who's listening and your journey. And I wanted to ask you kind of individually with yourself, like, what has your journey with wellness look like? And that can be to do with, for example, food and your food account. It can be to do with
Mm.
obviously the things that happen through the doctors. But what has that journey with wellness looked like to you, and how has that changed over time?
Um, I think because when I was getting into nutrition when I was a teenager, I went vegan at 15, and that was I think 2016. So that was kind of like
Mm,
the boom of veganism when it started getting really big. Um, but a lot of the influencers were like raw vegans, raw till four, like veganism back then was like eat 50 bananas a day and like you'll thrive. And so I feel like I potentially got sucked into that slightly. Like I wasn't as
mm,
extreme as a lot of the things that you'd see online, but I was definitely like probably not getting everything that I needed from my diet. And I think then again it shows the influence that people online have. Um but yeah, I was also at that time obviously struggling a lot with my health. So my kind of thing was just like trying to do what I thought was best for myself. As I've gotten older, I've noticed that our bodies actually tell us if like they're happy or not. So if I was eating one way and I felt rubbish, but like everyone online was saying I should be eating that way, I kind of know now that I shouldn't because my body will be telling me what's good for it and what's not. Um,
I want to pick up on a specific example here. Like, when
mhm.
was the last time where you kind of were able to listen to your body and you're like, oh, I know my body is telling me that? Like, when was the last time you can kind of remember that happening?
Well, I think it's all the time. It's like small
Mm.
signals every day. Like even today, I drank a coffee because I went to bed so late last night and like I've been so tired today. I never drink coffee. I'm not actually meant to have caffeine. So
Yeah.
might be a little bit jittery, but I never drink caffeine. And today I was like, God, I am exhausted. So I had a coffee
Mm.
and I never do that. And it's just the little cues every day. Like I know if I get hungry late at night, that's probably my body telling me to go to sleep or like give it more energy. Yeah.
No, it's so interesting, and I love like the way you were talking. It's almost like there is a separate relationship with yourself and your body and understanding yourself. And I think loads of the time, I know with myself, like there's been times where, for example, there were things with like mental, or physical health, which like I
Mm,
wasn't really listening to. I wasn't, for example, when you have like kind of building off what you were saying, when you've got things going on, but you're not really listening to your body and listening to your needs. I think it's like when you start to look at it almost like a objective other thing and trying to understand yourself and treating
yeah.
yourself like another person, being like, "Oh, okay, like I'm feeling hungry, let me get myself some food," and being really nice to yourself. How do you, not really a question we talked about, but with regards to like self love and understanding yourself, like, how do you
Hmm.
think that feeds into that? Like, how do you kind of look after yourself with wellness from a really loving place? Kind of, how do you cultivate that kind of relationship?
Looking after yourself is so important. And I feel like I've actually been so bad recently because I've been really neglecting it. Like with being
Mm,
so busy at uni, the thing is, I know people always get busy and then that's when they start to stop looking after themselves. But I was talking with my housemate earlier and we were like, this is exactly when I need to be like implementing those kind of like self care and self love things. And like, I haven't exercised in ages. And like, now's probably when I could really use like going to the gym or going on a run to clear my mind. But as soon as you get busy, you just don't do those things. So I'm obviously still working on it myself, as I will
mm.
always be, but it's kind of knowing, having those little things that you know help you, and when you're busy, still making time for the self care, which I'm
Definitely,
doing
yeah,
from
yeah.
today.
I know, I love that, and like I love how honest you were with the answer. I feel like being completely honest from my side, like it's something I'm definitely going through. Like the last year I was
Yeah.
on a placement year, and like it was so easy to find time to look after yourself, all those self love kind of things. And it's
Mhm.
when my days are so busy at the moment, and it's like today I had like a spare couple hours, so I went surfing and I got outside, and that really like I felt better from like being in cold
Yeah.
water and stuff like that. But it's just like finding the time, and I think sometimes it's also kind of being like kind of building off what you're saying. It's like when you don't have that time, being understanding with yourself and going like, "Oh, that's okay. I don't have time to work out today. I already have
Yeah.
so much pressure on myself. I don't need to put that extra level of like pressure on myself." Like just
Mhm.
factoring in when you can do it, and being nice to yourself and cultivating that because it's we're all going through a lot, and I know especially speaking as university students, it's
I know.
chaotic. There's
It's
deadlines
so
every week.
chaotic.
I know it is. It's such a huge thing, and
Yeah.
especially a toll on wellness and mental health.
Mhm.
But
No, I agree so much. And like, even the past few days, I was like, oh, I really want to go for a run because it's been sunny. But then I'm like, I'm actually using so much energy just because I'm using my brain so much right now. And like,
mm,
taking into account the fact that like thinking and working uses energy as well as like going and doing exercise. Um, but yeah, I it's interesting what you say about how like when you're on your placement you could schedule in more time to like look after yourself, because I feel like when I was younger I was always like, oh, I'd never want to do like a 9 to 5 normal job, like want to be my own boss and have the freedom. But nowadays I'm like, you have to work all the time when you're your own boss, and maybe having like a structure would be so nice because you can kind of like plan in the time that
mm.
you look after yourself, because at uni it's so chaotic. I feel like I can't because every week's going to be so different. And I feel like I would really enjoy having a structured work life.
Definitely. It's so interesting. And you're opening up almost like a bigger conversation because I think it's like I believe this idea sometimes like society tells us we have to meet certain things or tick boxes or like,
Mm,
get married by a certain point, get a certain type of job. And I think that works for, it works for some people and other people want to do different things. And it's like just finding what works best for you. And, other
yeah.
people's version of happiness may be different to yours, and that's okay. I think we're all on like going back to like we said about wellness, we're on these like really unique journeys and we're all very unique people. So it's just
Yeah.
finding yourself and finding what wellness looks like for you and what happiness looks for you. And I think that just
Mhm.
takes a lot of kind of like, listening to yourself. So I want
Yeah.
I want to go back to kind of the intuition because your Instagram account is
Mhm.
called Intuitively Isabel. And like we've talked about kind of like relying on it and relying on your body and stuff like that. But I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you like how do you try and like okay right now we're gonna do almost like it's a hypothetical but within the situation right now what
Yeah.
do you think your body's trying to tell you at the moment on this really stressful day you've had on different things like what are you feeling right now that you feel you need kind of thing.
My body's telling me to sleep. I need
Mm,
to go to bed early because I'm like a 10 p.m. girl. Like I go to bed early. And so staying up last night until 2 a.m. That's way past my normal bedtime. Like, I know so many uni students probably like stay up till 2 a.m. most nights. Not me. I'm like, I'll be up in the morning and I go to bed early.
Mm,
So definitely need to sleep. Especially this time of year, I really enjoy like warm, soupy foods.
mm,
Like, I think because I mean, one of my old dance teachers used to tell me it was because of my Ayurvedic group. I don't know how true this is, but he told me I'm like a Vata type group, which means that I need like warm teas and warm soups. But I do kind of relate to that because I feel like as soon as it gets cold, I just want like warm broths. So that's what I'm craving at the moment. And yeah,
yeah. I love
sleep.
that. So I wanted to ask you, like, I love your Instagram and both your kind of like intuitively Isabel and your normal one. And I know you did some traveling over, over the summer. And next summer I'm really hoping to go traveling. I want to go to Bali, and I know we've talked about it
Mm-hmm.
before, but I wanted to ask you this experience of going traveling and going to a different place. How do you think that changed you as a person? Like when you got back, how did that change the way you interacted in the relationships in your life, the way you saw things, maybe specifically with food, but how do you think how do you think traveling changed you? And to make it more specific, what do you think is the biggest change that you've experienced from, going traveling and coming back?
There's so much within this
Yeah.
topic. I'm
Run
gonna.
me through, run me through.
Okay,
Okay.
I've got like 3 points coming to mind.
Go
One,
for it. Run me through.
one is that Instagram is not the real world. So I feel like we will have expectations when we go traveling. Like we see these reels and all that on TikToks. I don't actually have TikTok because I deleted it and I feel like I'm so out the loop now. I don't have TikTok. But you always like see these videos of like this perfect time traveling. And don't get me wrong, because the places that I went were amazing. Like Southeast Asia is an
Mm,
amazing place to go, but it's just not all highlights. In the same way that you could see, like, you could come to Bournemouth and you could take like an amazing highlight reel, but you're not seeing like half of it. And that was definitely something I noticed when I went out there. Travel days are long and tiring. They're worth it, but you just don't see it online. Like, you hardly see that side of
mm,
traveling. So I think that was something I was probably quite naive going out. I didn't expect, like, it's just a lot more tiring than what you'd think. And
mm,
then secondly is uh, that I feel like the developing countries need more education. I know I spoke to you about this before, but obviously as like tourists and travelers going over, we're bringing so much money into these developing countries, but without kind of giving them the education of like what to do with this money. So I know in Indonesia there's like huge plastic problems, and people were literally just burying plastic on the beach. They just dig a hole in the sand and put all the plastic in and cover it over. And I've actually heard like surfers as well, like Kelly Slater said that Indonesia's the only place he's had to get out of the water because of plastic. But it's
oh
just because
wow.
they don't have the education and we're giving them all the money. And I think that they're getting better now, but more education needed out there. And then my kind of like final thing, which is my biggest takeaway from traveling, is that I feel like everyone always goes traveling and they're like, oh, I found myself, I learned so much about myself. And in a way, I definitely feel like I figured out so much about myself. But I think it's because you realize what you miss as well as like what you're enjoying out there. So I obviously had an amazing time, but there was a lot of things that I missed and I did get quite homesick. And it's
Mm,
those luxuries that you have at home, or like just the little things that you have that you start to miss. Like for me, it was because I was gone the whole summer. I was like, I've missed strawberry season in England. And my mum and I, when like growing up, we always make strawberry jam in the summer because the straw like we'd go to like one of the pick your owns, make strawberry jam, and I was out there like, I'm gonna miss the whole season. Like, I'm gonna get back end of September and the strawberries are gonna be gone. And it's like the little things that you miss that I feel like, for me anyways, really was where I kind of discovered the most about myself.
definitely. I want to build onto that, and I love that specific example you gave there about the strawberry farm. Like with the thing I genuinely love this the most about your Instagram and all your messages, it's really showing this like love of food and like the memories you can make with it. If you think about it, the amount of like dates or like in terms of like family relationships,
Mhm.
all these different bonds we strengthen over eating food. Like there's so many memories we have associated with specific kind of foods. How does that look for you? Like how did you kind of build this like love of food? and like what role has food played into your life with regards to like
Mhm.
happiness and enjoyment and all these relationships that you have in your life?
I love food. I'm such a massive foodie, but I do think that it's funny because obviously now I'm studying nutrition at uni,
Mm.
but I did go to uni. I went to art school and I went to a dance school before I actually came to study nutrition. But throughout all of that, like, I look back and I'm like, why didn't I study nutrition initially? Because throughout kind of all of my unis before, my love was like food and cooking, and I had this Instagram going, and I just never clocked the fact that I could like make it my career or like do something with it. But food is just so nostalgic in my life. Like, I think I told you before about how like my mum and I, we used to like share blueberry muffins, and she'd like have the tops and we'd grill them and I'd have the bottoms when I was younger. And so now like whenever I taste a blueberry muffin, I get that memory of my mum and I, and even like recipes that have been passed down from my dad, because like I said, he was a great chef.
Oh,
Yeah, I think food's just amazing because that like flavor recall, like taste recall, can take you back to such special places. And I think people always bond over food. And it's also like with traveling, it's like the most widely, what I believe, the most widely appreciated part of culture, because any age, like children that might not appreciate some other things, they all appreciate food. Like everyone loves food. So yeah.
definitely. No, I can't agree more. And I love that. It's like you said, like it can when you eat something, it can bring you like remind you of a person. But I also think it can
Mhm.
like remind you of a point in your life. Like I know, like I think like ice cream is a good example. Whenever I have an ice cream, I remember like going to the beach with my grandparents, my family, all those different
Yeah.
times. It's like it really brings you back to a different version of yourself, or like at a specific time. Like this, there's such a genuine like power with food and bringing happiness and all the things that we have, like around food and those relationships,
Mhm.
enjoyment that brings. And what I genuinely like, you should be so proud of yourself for doing. And I love that about your account is how much you celebrate that and you show that because I
Thank
think there is
you.
so much stuff. And one of the reasons I wanted you on the podcast is because there is so much stuff about what you shouldn't eat or why we should eat certain foods to create this sometimes really unrealistic kind of body standards or all these different things.
Yeah.
And I think that's there and it exists in social media. We're not going to fix that in a day, but what we can
Mhm.
do, and I think what you're doing is really showing like the enjoyment of food and the power of food, and like basically what I've been going on the whole podcast. But it's just like how food can bring happiness and bring these relationships, and just
Yeah.
be a way to celebrate life and be a way of celebrating that we're here right now. So I genuinely love what you're doing, and I really, really, really admire your social media page and your
Thank
messages
you.
and everything you're doing. I think it's really, really cool.
Thank you so much. No, I'm such like a huge believer in food being so much more than just like the food that you eat. Like things that feed you include like the joy in your life, your relationships with people, like what you're doing for work. It's like all these external factors that are all feeding you. Yet some people see nutrition as like food in terms
Mm.
of the physical thing. But in my head, if you're eating like kale and like chicken every day, but you're not happy, you're not healthy. Because I mean, I'm sure you know as well as anyone, like your mental health at this point is like just as important as your physical health. And that can often be neglected when it comes to nutrition. But I think we have to remember that food is meant to be about joy as well.
I love that so much. So I want to ask you like because I'm really genuinely interested to see what you say for this. Like I've no idea. I had a rough idea what you say for other things, but I have no idea what you're gonna say for this.
Yeah.
So we have like a tip of the week every podcast. And I always ask the guests, what would be your tip of the week for this podcast? Like it can be food related, life related, anything you want. But what would you like to leave people with? What would be your tip of the week?
Okay. I
Okay,
have two.
okay,
Tip one: if you want your food to taste the best, then use what's in season, because what's in season is what's going to be tasting the best. Like I genuinely think eating strawberries in December is a crime because
yeah.
they'll come from like so far and they'll be all watery. Like, use what's around. Tip number two is manage your time better than I did. Stay on top of your uni assignments and don't stay up until 2 a.m. doing your uni assignment the day before it's due.
No, definitely. But
That's
thank you
my
thanks for
advice.
being honest and like bringing that side of it too. Like I love how you didn't come along like, oh, I'm so rested and stuff. Like, cause I know myself, I'm so tired with deadlines and stuff, and it's just part. I feel like to a degree, it's part of being a student, and it's just
No,
it's just part of life.
exactly.
So it's yeah.
Yeah, and like even us, like we're interested in wellness, but we're not perfect. We're not like
No, gone
the cookie
though. Like,
cutter. Yeah,
no, yeah, yeah.
everyone's doing life. We're all just figuring it out.
We're all doing our best. We've all got these unique journeys,
Yeah.
and I think that's like anyone listening. That's probably like the biggest takeaway you can take from this. Like, but there's no like A to Z of like how to become the most healthiest person ever. Like, we're all on these unique journeys, and it's all about finding yourself and like all the things we said in this podcast. I'm not gonna repeat it, but it's all the
Yeah.
things you mentioned.